My family made me watch their kids every Christmas while they partied and enjoyed themselves, but last year I said I'm done. My evil big sister threatened to punish me by cutting off my college money, so I cut them off completely. Have you ever felt like your own family, the people who are supposed to love and support you unconditionally, actually saw you as less of a person and more like free labor? Like a never-ending, unpaid service they could just use? Because that's exactly how I felt for most of my life, trapped in an impossible role. My name is Ruby, and I came into this world as an apparent afterthought, arriving 12 long years after my eldest sister, Sarah, and a decade after Emma. By the time I was stringing together my first coherent memories, they were already navigating the dramatic waters of their teenage years. Boys in makeup were infinitely more interesting than their baby sister, and I quickly learned my place. Our suburban Minnesota home always echoed with my parents' booming pride for their older daughters. Sarah got straight A's again, they'd beam at dinner. Emma made the cheerleading squad, they'd announce to anyone who'd listen. I'd sit there, pushing peas around my plate, feeling like a ghost in my own home. A shadow. I still remember the day Sarah brought home her first boyfriend at 16. I was just 4, peeking through the banister rails as this tall, spiky-haired boy nervously shook Dad's hand. Emma wasn't far behind, starting to date at 15. They were both so beautiful, so confident, so everything I wasn't yet. "Ruby, finish your homework," Mom would say, barely glancing my way as she helped Sarah pick out prom dresses or discussed college applications with Emma. I learned early on to be self-sufficient, to do my own thing, to not need the attention that seemed permanently glued to my sister's achievements. "Did you hear?" Mom burst into the kitchen one morning when I was 7, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. Sarah got accepted to Northwestern. The news was followed by celebratory pancakes, while I sat in my usual spot, invisible as always. 2 years later, Emma left for college, and suddenly, I was alone in a house that felt both too empty and too full of their lingering presence. Their rooms became shrines to their past lives, trophies, photos, memories preserved exactly as they'd left them. Meanwhile, I carved out my own space, learned to find comfort in solitude, and tried not to mind when every conversation somehow circled back to my amazing older sisters. The real turning point, the moment my life took a drastic, exhausting detour, came when I was 15. Sarah, now married and living across town, gave birth to her first child, a boy named Tyler. I still remember the day she brought him home from the hospital. Everyone was cooing and crying, my parents practically floating with joy at becoming grandparents. "You'll be such a wonderful aunt," Mom said, squeezing my shoulder. Looking back now, I realized that was the precise moment everything started to shift, though I couldn't have known it then. At first, I was genuinely excited about being an aunt. Tyler was adorable, and I loved making silly faces at him while Sarah and Mom chatted over coffee. But that dynamic shifted faster than I could have imagined. It started with what seemed like an innocent request one Saturday morning. "Ruby, could you watch Tyler for a couple hours?" "I really need to do some shopping," Sarah asked, already slinging her purse over her shoulder. Before I could even respond, she placed Tyler in my arms and was heading for the door. "Thanks, sis. You're the best." That became the new normal. Every weekend, Sarah would show up at our parents' house, hand over Tyler, and disappear for hours. Sometimes it was shopping, other times lunch with friends, or a spa day, always under the guise of needing a break from motherhood. "It's not fair," I complained to Mom one day after Sarah had been gone for 5 hours. "I had plans to meet Jenny at the mall today." Mom barely looked up from her magazine. "Family helps family, Ruby. Your sister needs this time to herself. You'll understand when you're a mother." I was 16 when Emma announced she was pregnant. "It's a girl," she squealed at the family dinner. While everyone celebrated, I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. Sure enough, when little Sophie arrived, history repeated itself with a vengeance. Now my weekends were a circus of managing a 3-year-old Tyler and baby Sophie. Try helping a toddler build block towers while trying to keep a crying infant calm. It's not as fun as it sounds. And homework. Forget about it until they were both napping, if they ever napped at the same time. Jason asked me to the movies tonight. I told Dad one Saturday, bouncing Sophie on my hip and watching Tyler color on our coffee table instead of his coloring book. "Well, you should have thought about that before agreeing to watch the kids," he replied, not even looking up from his newspaper. I never agreed. The frustration in my voice made Sophie start crying. Lower your voice. You're upsetting the baby, Mom scolded from the kitchen. And stop being selfish. Your sisters need the support. I started spending my free time in the school library, researching colleges. Not just any colleges. Ones far, far away from home. I threw myself into studying, knowing good grades were my ticket out. Every on my report card was one step closer to freedom. When my acceptance letter from Berkeley arrived, including a partial scholarship, I felt like I could finally breathe. A heavy weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted. But my family had other plans. The community college here has a great business program, Sarah suggested during what they called a family council, but what I secretly called an intervention. You could live at home and save money and help with the kids, Emma added brightly, as if that was a selling point. I looked around our living room at their expecting faces. Mom, Dad, Sarah, Emma, and Grandma Rose, who'd been unusually quiet throughout the discussion. Actually, Grandma Rose's voice cut through the tension like a knife. I think Berkeley is perfect for Ruby. Everyone turned to stare at her. That program is exactly what she needs for her future career, and your grandfather's education fund will help cover what the scholarship doesn't. I could have hugged her right then. The family council ended with my parents and sisters shooting disappointed looks my way, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I could see my future clearly, and it didn't involve being everyone's free babysitter. College life was everything I dreamed of and more. My dorm room became my sanctuary, my classmates became real friends, and for the first time in years, my weekends were my own. No crying babies, no sticky-fingered toddlers, just me and my choices. But you can't completely escape family obligations, especially during the holidays. I tried to visit as little as possible, but Thanksgiving and Christmas were non-negotiable. Mom would call weeks in advance, her voice thick with expectation. Everyone's asking about you, Ruby. The kids miss their aunt. The first Christmas break after I started college, I walked into absolute chaos. Sarah now had 2 boys, Tyler and his new baby brother, Luke. Emma had managed to add a boy named Max to her family alongside Sophie. But that wasn't even the half of it. Ruby! Aunt Janet called out the moment I walked through the door, immediately steering her twin 5-year-olds in my direction. The kids have been asking about you. No, they haven't, I thought. They barely know who I am. But before I could protest, Cousin Rachel's 7-year-old daughter attached herself to my leg, followed closely by Cousin Mike's 9-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter. Ruby, honey, Mom called from the kitchen, barely visible behind a mountain of dishes. Why don't you take the kids upstairs to your room? I'll bring up some snacks later. And just like that, I was corralling 8 children up the stairs, feeling more like a sheepdog than a college student. My old bedroom became a war zone. Toys everywhere, juice spills on my childhood bedspread, crayon marks appearing mysteriously on the walls. Hours passed. My stomach growled as delicious smells wafted up from downstairs, where the adults were enjoying their peaceful holiday meal. When Mom finally appeared with a plate of kid-friendly snacks, she barely made eye contact. By the time I managed to sneak downstairs at 8 o'clock, after coordinating with various parents to collect their exhausted children, the dining room was empty except for dirty dishes and picked-over serving platters. "Oh, Ruby," Emma said, already putting on her coat. "Max was an angel for you, right? We've got to run. It's past his bedtime." Sarah followed suit, gathering her boys while chatting with Mom about New Year's plans. Aunt Janet was helping her twins into their snow boots, while cousins Rachel and Mike were carrying their sleeping children to their cars. Not a single thank you. Not one person asked if I'd eaten. Not even a backward glance as they all filed out, leaving me standing in the wreckage of Christmas dinner. "Ruby, be a dear and help me with these dishes," Mom called from the kitchen, as if I hadn't just spent the entire day doing her a massive favor. I looked at the mountain of dirty plates and serving dishes, evidence of a holiday meal I never got to enjoy. The message from Mom arrived during finals week, just as I was finishing my last paper for the semester. My phone buzzed with her usual pre-holiday update, but this one made my blood run cold. "Sarah and Emma are coming with the kids," it read cheerfully. "Plus Janet and her twins, Rachel's girls, Mike's kids, and exciting news. Sarah's sister-in-law, Lisa, is joining us with her 3. It'll be such a wonderful Christmas with all the little ones." I did the math in my head. 12 kids, 12. I sat there in the library, staring at my phone until the screen went dark, then lit it up again to make sure I'd read it right. The message stayed the same, but something inside me finally changed. 2 years of college had given me perspective. I'd watch my roommate Kate go home for holidays and return with stories of actual family time, board games, movie nights, proper Christmas dinners. My friend Jessica's biggest complaint about going home was having to share the TV remote with her siblings. Meanwhile, I'd spent every holiday of my adult life as an unpaid nanny service. I didn't reply to Mom's message. Instead, I packed my bag for Christmas break with an unusual sense of calm. For the first time, I wasn't dreading the holidays because I was going home with a plan. The days leading up to Christmas were deceptively normal. I helped Mom in the kitchen, breathing in the familiar scents of her signature dishes: pot roast, honey-glazed ham, and her famous apple pie. I decorated the Christmas tree, carefully hanging the ornaments I had made in elementary school alongside the fancy glass balls Mom reserved for the front of the tree. Christmas Day arrived with a flurry of activity. Cars began pulling into our driveway, one after another, each bringing more chaos than the last. Sarah arrived first with her boys, now 5 and 3, followed closely by Emma with Sophie and Max. Lisa, Sarah's sister-in-law, showed up with her 3 kids, all under 7. The rest of the relatives poured in after them, each family adding more children to the growing crowd. I watched from the corner of the living room as the noise level rose steadily. Sarah made her way toward me, her youngest balanced on her hip, while the older one tugged at her sleeve. "Ruby!" she called out with that familiar tone, the one that meant she was about to pass off her parental duties. "The boys have been so excited to see you. They can't wait to play with their favorite aunt." She was already nudging them in my direction, the same way she had 100 times before. But this time was different. This time I stood my ground, and I looked her straight in the eye. "No," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm not watching the kids today. I'm here to enjoy Christmas like everyone else." The room didn't exactly fall silent. There were too many children for that. But I could feel the ripple of shock move through the adults. Sarah's mouth dropped open. Mom froze in the doorway with a plate of cookies. Dad looked up from his newspaper with raised eyebrows. "But who's going to watch all the kids?" Emma's panicked voice carried across the living room as I turned toward the stairs. I glanced back just long enough to see Mom's helpless shrug and the bewildered looks on everyone's faces. The sight almost made me laugh. They looked like someone had just told them Christmas was canceled. My feet carried me up the familiar stairs, past the family photos marking my sister's many achievements, and into my childhood bedroom. The soft click of the door closing behind me felt like the period at the end of a very long sentence. I flopped onto my bed, the same twin bed I'd had since middle school, and let out a long breath. Downstairs, I could hear the muffled sounds of chaos, adult voices rising and falling, children crying, the occasional thump of something being dropped or thrown. Can you believe her? So selfish. In my day, the fragments of conversation that filtered up through the floor made me smile. Let them talk. Let them finally face the reality of watching their own children. My phone buzzed with a message from Kate. "Did you do it? Did you finally stand up to them? Operation Freedom is in progress." I typed back. "Currently hiding in my room while they figure out how to parent their own kids." A knock on my door interrupted my texting. "Ruby!" Mom's voice was trying for concern, but landed somewhere between annoyed and desperate. "The children are asking for you." I didn't move from my comfortable position on the bed. "I'm busy, Mom." Her sigh was audible through the door, followed by the sound of her footsteps retreating down the hallway. I returned to my phone, joining a group chat with my college friends who were providing running commentary on their own family Christmas dramas. Jessica's uncle was drunk again. Mike's grandma was asking when he'd find a nice girl. Kate's brother had brought home a surprise girlfriend. 2 hours passed like this, in peaceful rebellion. My phone buzzed constantly with messages of support from friends who'd heard me complain about holiday babysitting duty for years. The chaos downstairs eventually settled into a different rhythm, one that didn't include my participation. When I finally descended the stairs for dinner, you'd have thought I'd risen from the dead, judging by everyone's expressions. Aunt Janet actually dropped her fork. Cousin Rachel's mouth hung open mid-sentence. I scanned the dining room, noting Emma's conspicuous absence. Through the doorway to the living room, I could see her attempting to organize some kind of game with the children, her usually perfect hair coming loose from its elegant updo, a stain of unknown origin on her festive sweater. Taking my seat at the adult table, a first in recent memory, I surveyed the spread before me. Everything was still hot, still fresh, still waiting to be enjoyed. No lukewarm leftovers, no picked-over remnants, no half-eaten children's portions. I could feel the weight of disapproving stares as I filled my plate with Mom's honey-glazed ham, Aunt Janet's sweet potato casserole, and Cousin Rachel's famous green bean dish. The clinking of silverware against plates couldn't quite mask the tension in the room. I was halfway through enjoying my first proper holiday meal in years when Sarah finally snapped. She'd been watching me eat with the kind of intensity usually reserved for nature documentaries about predators and prey. "Well," she announced to the table at large, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "looks like someone's gotten a little too big for her boots at college. Seems they've forgotten all about sisterly duties." I took my time with my spoonful of mashed potatoes, deliberately licking the spoon clean before responding. The food really was excellent when you got to eat it fresh. "Funny thing about sisterly duties," I replied, keeping my voice level and calm. "I don't remember seeing free babysitter in any sisterhood manual. Maybe you could point that chapter out to me, right after the part where parents are supposed to watch their own children." The gasps around the table would have been comical if they weren't so genuine. Aunt Janet actually clutched her pearls. I hadn't known people really did that outside of movies. Cousin Rachel was suddenly very interested in her green beans, while Uncle Mike seemed to be trying to disappear into his dinner roll. Mom and Dad exchanged that special look they had, the one that meant they were disappointed but didn't want to cause a scene. Dad's fork was frozen halfway to his mouth, and Mom's smile had gone tight around the edges. But instead of the lecture I expected, Mom cleared her throat and asked Uncle Mike about his new job. The conversation stuttered back to life, though everyone kept shooting glances my way, as if expecting me to sprout a second head. I just kept eating, savoring every bite of food that hadn't been picked over by tiny hands or gone cold while I changed diapers. About 20 minutes into dinner, Emma appeared in the doorway, looking like she'd been through a war. Her Christmas sweater was now sporting what looked like juice stains in addition to the earlier unknown substance, and her hair had completely escaped its updo. "Sarah!" she called, her voice carrying a hint of desperation. "Could you?" Sarah shot me one last, withering look before pushing back from the table. The sisters exchanged places, with Emma practically collapsing into the vacated chair. She looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired I'd been feeling every holiday for years. Emma filled her plate mechanically, but she couldn't seem to resist giving me the stink-eye between bites. I met her gaze, shrugged, then went back to enjoying my dinner. After finishing my meal, including 2 servings of Mom's apple pie, a luxury I'd never been able to enjoy before, I quietly excused myself from the table. No one protested. No one asked me to help clean up. No one demanded I take a shift with the kids. Morning light filtered through the living room windows as I came downstairs, still riding the high of my peaceful Christmas evening. That feeling evaporated the moment I saw them, Mom, Dad, and Sarah, sitting in an obvious ambush formation. Sarah didn't waste any time. "What kind of performance was that yesterday?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Making us look like bad parents in front of everyone." I sank into an armchair, surprisingly calm. "Performance? You mean me wanting to enjoy Christmas like everyone else? I'm just tired of being the unpaid, unappreciated babysitter while everyone else gets to have an actual holiday." "But you never complained before," Mom interjected, her brow furrowed with genuine confusion. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. "Never complained? I've been complaining for years, Mom. But it was just too convenient to ignore me, wasn't it? Too easy to keep exploiting the good little sister who never makes waves." They all started talking at once, their voices overlapping in a chorus of accusations and reminders of sisterly duty and family obligation. Dad kept mentioning how much they'd done for me over the years. Mom brought up how well they'd raised me, and my sisters alternated between guilt trips and outright attacks. I let them run out of steam before speaking again. "They're not my children," I said quietly but firmly. "I didn't give birth to them. I didn't decide to have them. They're your responsibility, not mine. Especially during the holidays, when I'm supposed to be relaxing too." That's when Sarah played what she thought was her trump card. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. Well, maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson about gratitude. Let's see how you manage without Mom and Dad paying your college tuition. The room fell silent. I watched Mom and Dad exchange uncertain glances, clearly caught off guard by the suggestion. But instead of the panic Sarah clearly expected to see on my face, I felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, all the cards were on the table. I stood up slowly. Actually, Sarah, Grandma's been paying my tuition from Grandpa's education fund. You know, the one he set up for all his granddaughters? The same fund that helped put you through nursing school and Emma through business school. And even if that wasn't the case, I have a partial scholarship. Plus, unlike some people, I'm not afraid of working to support myself. Without waiting for their response, I turned and walked upstairs. It took me less than 10 minutes to pack my bag. I'd gotten good at traveling light over the years. As I came back down, Mom and Dad started calling after me, their voices a mixture of anger and panic. But I was done talking. I walked out the front door, letting it close behind me on their protests and recriminations. The winter air bit at my cheeks as I headed to my car, but I barely felt it. The drive back to campus was oddly peaceful. As the miles between me and home increased, I systematically blocked their numbers. Mom, Dad, Sarah, Emma. Each tap on my phone screen felt like breaking another link in a chain I hadn't even realized was weighing me down. My dorm room welcomed me back with its blessed simplicity. No toys scattered across the floor, no sticky fingerprints on the windows, no constant background noise of children demanding attention. Just my books, my laptop, and my own thoughts. January passed in a blur of new classes and quiet weekends. February brought snow and a blessed lack of family drama. I threw myself into my studies, made plans with friends, and for the first time in years, felt like I was living my own life instead of existing in the margins of everyone else's. Then, one cold Saturday morning in late February, I looked out my dorm window and saw them. Mom, Dad, and Emma, standing in the parking lot, looking uncertain and out of place among the students rushing to and from classes. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home, but something in their body language made me pause. They looked different, smaller somehow, less like authority figures, and more like people who'd driven 4 hours to right a wrong. I met them in the lobby. Emma spoke first. Can we buy you coffee? We'd like to talk. The campus cafe was quiet that morning. We sat at a corner table, steam rising from our cups, the silence heavy with unspoken words. Mom was the first to break it. We've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. After you left, well, we had some long conversations. As a family, very long conversations. Ruby, we were wrong. All of us, Emma added, meeting my eyes directly. We took advantage of you for years and called it family duty to make ourselves feel better about it. Dad cleared his throat. We didn't realize, or maybe we didn't want to realize how unfair it was. You deserved your own holidays, your own time. You deserved to be treated like an adult, not the family babysitter. I took a long sip of my coffee, letting their words sink in. What about Sarah? Emma sighed. Sarah, she's still processing it. You know how she is. She has trouble admitting when she's wrong. But the rest of us, we want to do better. Things will be different now, Mom promised. No more pushing the kids on you. No more expecting you to give up your holidays. We want you to come home because you want to, not because you're needed for childcare. I studied their faces, the sincerity in Mom's eyes, the regret in Dad's expression, the openness in Emma's posture. Okay, I said finally, I believe you. That evening, after they'd left, I unblocked their numbers. Within minutes, I had a text from Emma. Miss you, little sis. For real this time. The following months brought a new normal. I visited home some weekends, and it was actually pleasant. When Emma brought her kids, she watched them herself or hired a babysitter. Mom stopped trying to orchestrate family bonding moments that always seemed to end with me in charge of a pack of children. Sarah and I still haven't spoken. Sometimes I see her posts on social media, pictures of her boys growing up so fast. Part of me hopes that one day she'll realize what she did wrong, that she'll reach out first. Until then, I'm at peace with the distance. It was a hard lesson to learn, and even harder to deliver, but standing up for myself finally gave me the peace I deserved. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't made that stand. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to draw a really tough line with your own family, even if it meant risking everything? Tell me what you think. I really want to know your stories.